Can I invite you to join me with our opening? Almighty God, the source of knowledge and understanding, guide the minds of those who are about to take counsel together on matters concerning this county, that in their debate and in their decisions they may faithfully discharge the duties of their office, and promote the health, safety, and well-being of those they seek to serve. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. May I welcome members to the 255th meeting of this council, and also to include officers, and a warm welcome to members of the public this evening. We'll now just read our standard notice regarding recording. Notice to anyone intending to record a meeting. If you would like to film, blog, tweet, or take photographs of the meeting, you are permitted to do so without causing disturbance to the meeting proceedings. A designated area has been set out to allow you to do this. Please be aware that you are not permitted to move outside the designated area, as this may disrupt the meeting. The protocol which governs this activity has been placed on the table for your information. Please also be aware that members of the public who are not part of the meeting have not consented to being recorded. Therefore, please do not include them in any recording activity. And I would thank you for your cooperation. Now we move to the agenda proper. On item 1 of the agenda for apologies, we have apologies from Councillor Parsons, which means that in our voting this evening we are 25 without allowing for any declarations. My chairman's announcements and those of my vice chairman have already been circulated to you on those occasions when I and my vice chair have represented the county in the last 2 months. I need to advise members of the sad death notified to us of Alderman Tommy Southern at the end of last week, our only serving Alderman. He lived to, I said sad, but he lived to a great age of 104, and in talking to his family, he was active right to the last. I will recall that he came to my civic reception last October, and many of you will remember that he actually opened for us the new bus terminal just over 2 years ago. He became an Oakham Town Councillor in 1953, the year of the coronation of our Queen, and looking around this room, many of you were not born in 1953. So he has achieved a life of service to the county, a very active life, and something we should all aspire to. He was actually chairman of Oakham Town Council as leader before we actually had a mayor, I'm told, of Oakham, and he also served as mayor for one period. I'm sure there's going to be announcements in the press about this this coming weekend, and his funeral is going to take place next Monday on the 21st of this month, and of course the council will be represented. So I would ask you to join me in a silence of tribute. Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, announcements from the leader, candidates, candidate service. I understand there nothing to thank you, and also cabinet service. Agenda item number 4, declarations of interest. I've been advised, Councillor King, that you may have a declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Cabinet portfolio holder for its assets, I will take no part in the planning matter being discussed under item 8 on the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Are there any? Councillor Foster.
Mr. Chairman, fellow members, my interjection at this stage, this early stage of the meeting, is also to do with item 8. You will know that I am the portfolio holder within which the Children's Centre's operations are based, and therefore it's important to me that you know that all such considerations have been left at the door, and that I, for one, will be only concentrating and considering planning matters when we're covering item 8.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. That will be noted. Looking around the room, there are no other declarations. Thank you. Sorry, I'm Mr. Councillor Miles.
Chair, I was on Cabinet reports made to put forward this children's centre. So I'm not very prepared on this, so I intend to stay down.
Thank you. Right. Thank you. That concludes the declaration. Agenda item 5 is the minutes of the 254th meeting of the council. Minutes already circulated. Can I have the proposed by Councillor Green? Yes, correct. Abstention. Thank you. And that concludes the minutes. Right, thank you very much. Are there any matters arising from the minutes, members? Thank you. One slight omission of me right at the beginning, because we have members, and I may be guilty, because we have so many members of the public present, I would ask you to concentrate on using your microphones wherever possible. You can pick me up when I fail on that particular point. Agenda item number 6, petitions, deputations, the members of the public. We have and questions, of course. We have no petitions, but we actually have 5 questions. And as regards to the petitions, of which there are 4, it's my intention to take those, deputations, of which there are 4. It's my intention to take those to agenda 8, because I think you will agree in this particular instance this evening, they will link in directly to the presentation that we're getting from officers. And I think that will also help members of the public. And so that's my intention this evening. So we have 5 questions, and the first question is from Mr. Rigor. Mr. Rigor, thank you. I have a roving microphone.
So my question for the council is just whether the council's aware of the Burns inquiry into hunting with dogs and what it says on the document that you says.
Right, and the question which will come from Councillor Kingwood is actually going to be read out by our Chief Executive.
Councillor King's asked me to just read it out. Yes, the council is aware of the Burns inquiry, and based on your question, time has been taken to review the report of the Committee of Inquiry into hunting with dogs in England and Wales. It would perhaps be helpful at this point to remind council that the decision taken to allow the hunt to use the Captain's car park is purely to facilitate a safe assembly point for the hunt, and to allow what is a popular spectacle to take place in line with a tradition going back many years.
Thank you. Mr. Rigor, you're allowed a supplementary question if you have one.
Yes, I just In relation to that then, as you're, I'm sure people are aware, last year one of the employees of the Customer Hunt was prosecuted for blocking the badge there. I just wondered.
Your microphone, please.
If you could make sure you speak into the mic.
So,
Sorry, Jen.
so just in relation to that, what did the council think that means in relation to the intentions of the Customer Hunt?
It is not for the council to ensure that the hunt acts within the law. This is a matter for the police. I'm aware specifically of the provisions within the Burns report referred to in the question in relation to the stopping of badger stats. I'm also aware of an instance in 2015 where a hunt employee pleaded guilty to an offence and was successfully prosecuted and fined for the offence of interfering with the badger stat in contravention of the Protection of Badgers Act 1992. To me, this highlights where illegal acts take place, the police and the courts are acting.
Thank you, sir. We now go to question 2, which is from Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm asking this question as a resident and not an Oakham Town Councillor, just to clarify. What was the total amount of money spent by Rutland County Council to erect and take down the scaffolding at the rear of the Rutland County Library here in Oakham?
Councillor King, I understand your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brooks, for the question. The scaffolding was erected in order to allow both councillors and members of the public to get an impression of the size and scale of the proposed building. The total cost, including erection, hire and demolition, was just short of £3,000. Thank you, Chairman.
And as is our normal practice, Mr. Brooks, you have an additional question if you so wish.
Yeah. Does the council think that, bearing in mind that myself as a town councillor and a resident were actually notified about this construction, that the money spent is actually under your policy for value for money?
Absolutely.
Chairman, in response to the question from Mr. Brooks, any new development of any size, particularly one in the centre of Oakham, would require us to make some form of presentation to both councillors and members of the public. I can only point you to the amount of work that both Aldi and Sainsbury's spent before they went forward with their proposals. It's therefore essential that we did something. Officers chose to do this particular work, which I have to say to give an impression of the size of the building. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor King. Our third question this evening is from a Mrs. Rice, but she's indicated that she would like that question to be asked by Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we have assurance Bull Lane will become a no dropping off zone, loading and unloading, ensuring access for emergency vehicles and residents at all times?
Thank you. Councillor Mathias, you can answer.
Mr. Spencer, I'll give you the answer. Bull Lane currently has WO lines throughout. However, it can and already is used, for example, by blue badge holders. Continue. We're not aware of any difficulties for emergency access in this particular area. Traffic associated with the library site will decrease as the current parking spaces will no longer be used. The Children's Centre operates in a different way to a school or nursery. Children are not dropped off to attend the centre unaccompanied by their parents. All children attending the centre are accompanied by their parents. The majority of those children are under 2. Bull Lane is unlikely to be used as a dropping off point in any case, as Bull Lane is completely the other side of the proposed Children's Centre access. However, in the unlikely event that this does become a problem, loading restrictions would be considered, and in any case, parking enforcement will definitely continue as it does.
And likewise, Mr. Spencer, do you have Another question?
Therefore, how will the lorries be coming down Ball Lane to deliver to the new prospective children's centre?
I think in terms of when the building is being erected, if it is, then of course there will be some traffic involved in that. I'm not aware that we would expect any particular deliveries to a children's centre if it was to be built. I can always double check that and write you afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Price, and I think that's probably the best way forward on that additional question. Thank you. Question number 4.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm sorry, sir, you only have the 2 questions. Question number 4 is from Mr. Woodley.
Hello. Can the residents have assurance or a covenant, if plans are approved, that the centre will only offer the services as described in the application and that the hours of operation will be 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday?
I think again, Councillor Price will get to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think a few questions for me. The application is under category D1. D1 covers schools, nurseries, etc. And Rutland County Council does not limit establishments under this classification, e.g. parents' evenings, things like that. This is not a school or a nursery, and the levels of activity are significantly lower than that. As this is a town centre location where there is significant activity well into the evenings and at weekends, there will be no justification for a condition to restrict opening hours. The current library opening hours extend to Saturday, and there are a number of events targeted at children already provided at the library, including, for example, rhyme time, and with weekly with up to 8 children, parents and carers in attendance. The library used to be open into the evening, and we continue to keep hours under review and are looking at ways that the library opening hours could in fact be extended. On an occasional basis, the library is already used in the evening for events, meetings and clubs. Our libraries continue to evolve. Currently, for example, Ketton Library is co-located with a GP surgery, something we have supported and encouraged. The Children's Centre will operate as it does now, but in a way that is more integrated with the library, allowing segregation and or integration of activities.
And standard procedures, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
I find the answer slightly unreassuring. You were left it very open, which means when the residents were asked to consider the application through notification and the general consultation as it forms period, you were quite specific in the functions and the hours of operation in your deputations yourselves that you gave us. So can you please clarify why you can be open when you feel like it?
Mr. Woodley, I can only really refer you to the answer I've given. I think we do have to accept that there will be occasions, for example, parents evenings or training, cleaners coming in and out, things like that. So to really put a limit on the hours for what would be a children's centre, I think I'll just have to stick with the answer I've already given.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Our 5th and last question is from Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks.
At the last Development and Licensing Committee meeting, Councillor James Lamey said that flat roofs were not permitted in the conservation area. If this is true, and if so, why did he or the council not consider this when dealing with the proposed development at the rear of the county library here in Oakham?
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I think Councillor Lamey will go to that.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Brooks. There is no law, policy or regulation that precludes flat roofs in conservation areas. At the last planning meeting, I voted in favour of the library extension, which is a flat roof in a conservation area. A point which I would say undermines the question about what I think if there would be a policy with it. If there was a policy precluding flat roofs, I would not have voted for the application on the 9th. I did, however, make comments on a different application which contained elements of a flat roof. However, the nature, structure and design of the application are severely different from the library building which came before us. Any fair-minded individual would understand this and not confuse the two. Finally, Chair, I make all planning decisions on the merits of each individual application that comes before me.
Thank you, Councillor Lewin. Mr. Brooks, you have, of course, a supplementary question if you wish.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. That takes us then to agenda item number 7, questions from members of the council. And we do have a question from Councillor Baines. Councillor Baines.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Is the leader aware of the public perception that the decision on the planning application on tonight's agenda is a foregone conclusion, and will he assure us that this is not the case?
Before I summarise why I believe it is, as you request, I'm very sure this is just what I understand. There were 2 different projects originally. One for refurbishing the library, which was agreed in June by Cabinet. The later one, which we now refer to as the Children's Centre. That moved forward in around July this year, with it going on a forward plan. That then eventually was produced into a Cabinet report in mid-September. No major issues were raised by either councillors or members of the public after or before their Cabinet meeting. Following that final process, the planning application was submitted to the council. And it was at that point that I was aware of neighbours' concerns, which were mainly expressed to me as being around children in the library, children in the garden, and trafficking specifically in Ball Lane and the crossing of the road. Following the planning meeting, I was then made aware that councillors had raised concerns about the conservation area, and clearly that caused me some concern. I hope tonight, if the 24 members who remain at the planning meeting will have open minds and will decide on that matter, on planning matters. And yes, after all that process, I am aware of the community's concerns about this particular proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Baines?
I do, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps the leader would also care to comment. This decision was taken by Cabinet on the 10th of September. On the 24th of September, there was a meeting of the Committee of the Local History and Records Society. I was not present at that meeting, but as president of that society, I have access to the minutes. At that meeting, the officer responsible for libraries and culture, according to the minutes, gave an assurance to the committee that eventually the Children's Centre was moving to a building at the library. The result of this, I've no idea if the society would have put in some comment on it, but certainly they were under the impression that it would not be the case. Now, I do not think that the officer deliberately misled the committee. I think, in fact, there is the misconception, quite common among the public, because I gather from someone who was present, the comment made was that officers had voted in favour of it. The public do not actually make a distinction between what we formally decide as council and what officers may at that stage have felt. So I'm really asking the leader again if he would understand the real concern that this is a foregone conclusion. Thank you, Jim.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. A very useful explanation by Councillor Baines, which leads me into a response. All projects that the council undertakes don't necessarily come from one single source. There can be brainwaves of councillors. They can often be very good projects developed by officers. This particular project was largely worked up by officers some considerable time ago. And as you heard me say earlier on, the one part of it, the refurbishment of the library and the temporary transfer of the library to the museum when that takes place, was decided as early as June. And the officer concerned did spend a lot of time explaining to various community groups, including the one referred to by Councillor Baines. Officers then were aware that they had a project which was being taken forward by Cabinet, and therefore, as far as they were concerned, it was in order to talk to members of the community. Perhaps in hindsight, that officer could have said that it was subject to the final decision, which was the Planning Commission. However, you need to realise that the professional planners by that point had given their pre-planning advice and been very clear and been supportive of the design and the location. And at that particular point, there was no reason why that officer should have qualified the useful comment he was passing on to a community group. And therefore, I don't think in any way that indicated it was a foregone conclusion. If we have to keep all decisions to members of the community until that final decision, or plan decision, I'm quite sure all the councillors will have a view about an element of secrecy. And therefore, to be open on that, I think is the right way to go forward. And the report talking about it, the final details, was a public document from the 13th of September. The matter did appear in the local press on the same day or the day before the meeting of the society, and then in the Cabinet moved forward. That newspaper, I don't think, to my memory, has included the same exclusion to say subject to planning. I think it announced that Cabinet had decided to move forward, and therefore I believe the officer was in order to make that statement, and I don't think we would have any control of the newspaper if we chose differently. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor King. So that takes care of agenda item 7. So now we move to agenda item 8, which is the referral committee decisions, and its members of pages 5 to 28 in your papers. Report 203-2016 from the Director of Places relating to planning application 2016-087 and the proposed extension to the library. Now, as members will be aware, there was some additional legal advice received at the end of last week. That was circulated to all members by email and by hard copy. But I am mindful that members of the public in particular will not be aware of that communication. So therefore, I am going to ask our monitoring officer, for the sake of clarity, to go through that paper, and I am going to ask any members if they have any questions following that, so that we are very clear in our deliberations going forward. So I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the public. Part 3.2.1 of the Council's Constitution sets out that Council is responsible for determining development proposals in the event of a conflict between the committee and an application submitted by the Cabinet. This is correct. However, further legal advice that we've received has clarified that this rule should have been enacted as soon as it became apparent that the conflict existed during the Development Control and Licensing Committee meeting, and at that point the decision should have been automatically referred to Council. So at the point in the committee meeting when a proposal was made to refuse the application, advice should have been given by the committee's legal advisor that the decision could not be taken by the committee and it would automatically be referred to full Council. Consideration of the application by the Development Control and Licensing Committee should have ceased at this point.
The result of this is that the decision made by the Development Control and Licensing Committee in respect of this application is not in accordance with the Council's constitution. This position needs to be corrected at the meeting this evening. To do this, the Council must suspend procedural 31(5)(d)(1), which says that in the case of a decision of the Development Control and Licensing Committee on an application for planning permission which has been referred to the Council shall either endorse the decision of the committee or remit it to the committee for reconsideration and final decision. Suspending this procedure rule allows full council to make the final decision in respect of the planning application as if no decision has already been made. This means that either a refusal or approval decision this evening will be lawful. If this rule is not suspended, the legal position is not corrected and the council will be unable to take a lawful decision this evening. I am therefore seeking a proposal for the motion that council suspend procedure rule 31(5)(d)(1) for the duration of this meeting in order to ensure that we are operating within our constitution. I'm sure you will understand that this is an unusual set of circumstances, but it is extremely important that this position is corrected. That is why I'm advising in the strongest possible terms that you approve this motion. Before the Chair asks for a proposal, I would also like to take the opportunity to remind the members of the requirements of the Members' Planning Code. In the run-up to tonight, you will have heard and seen lots of information in respect to the project to relocate the Children's Centre and the varying opinions that are held about this. You will have heard from the public, the applicant and each other as councillors. This may have started to inform your decision, but you should approach the decision this evening with an open mind. When you come to make the decision, you should keep at the front of your mind that you are entitled to have and to have expressed your own views on the matter, provided you are prepared to reconsider your position in the light of all the evidence and arguments. You must keep an open mind and hear all the evidence before you, both the officer's presentation of the facts and their advice, as well as the arguments from all sides. You are only entitled to take account of material planning considerations and must disregard considerations irrelevant to the question and legal context at hand, and you are to come to a decision after giving what you feel is the right weight to those material considerations. So as a reminder, the motion that I'm seeking, or the Chair will be seeking a proposal for this evening, is that Council suspend procedural 31(5)(d)(1) for the duration of this meeting in order to ensure that we are operating within our constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Monitor Officer. Yes, I'm just going to say thank you. It's very important to me as Chairman that I have your agreement that you have no questions, so I will be seeking any questions from you for clarification. I did see Councillor King first. I'm going to Councillor Oxford, Councillor King, Councillor Mathias, Councillor.
Thank you. As a matter of personal information, I've been advised by the monitoring officer that although I won't take part in item 8, as this is a procedural rule, then I should remain for that item and that item only.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Mathias.
Chair, it wasn't a question as such, you might want to.
Councillor Oxford.
I presume that we are standing to ask questions and take part in the debate in this meeting.
Yes, but you do know I have given dispensation.
Yes,
for the duration.
oh, yes, no, I was making that point.
Yes, indeed. Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
I just want to make sure I was standing.
No, absolutely right. Which is slightly different. I have to explain to members of the public, we are operating under council rules this evening. When we have DC, they are allowed to remain seated. Thank you, Councillor Oxford. That's been very helpful.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification for future reference, if we ever have to come to this point again in the DC meeting. Just wanted clarification of the fact that as soon as it became apparent that the conflict existed during the DCNL meeting, so was that the mood of the meeting? Was that when the proposition and proposal was made to refuse? Because I'm a little bit concerned if, for example, there are 2 members who are against and the rest on the committee are for, would, if they propose that it's refused, propose and the second comes to it, does that mean we wouldn't be able to debate in the future and perhaps overturn that proposition?
Through you, Chair, we've got Hannah Edwards with us this evening, our planning lawyer, so I'm going to ask her to give a bit more legal advice. Thank you. Chairman, through you. Yes, that is quite correct, that we're looking for a clear indication in DC committee that there's a conflict with the officer recommendation. That's whether it's one for approval or refusal. It will really depend on the circumstances of the meeting. If the feel of the meeting is quite clear that all members are going against the officer recommendation, the legal officer may well step in at an early stage in order to halt the proceedings and refer the matter to full council. Otherwise, when there is a proposal, if that first initial proposal is against the officer recommendation, at that point it would need to be sent. We can't get to the stage of a seconder and a vote on that, otherwise we end up in a position where a decision is made, and that would not be in accordance with the Constitution. So yes, your understanding is right, that at the point of the proposal, that's the last opportunity to hold proceedings and send it to full council.
And I would say that was extremely helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chairman. Having heard that useful answer, I have a question from it. That is there anything in these procedures to stop someone vexatiously making that proposal merely in order to send the application to full council?
Thank you, and again, Chair, through you. No, the procedures are as described, but members, of course, should always be following the planning code of conduct, and therefore, when they're debating the application and putting forward their proposal, it should be in line with the code of conduct, and therefore vexatious proposals shouldn't be made if the code of conduct is being adhered to.
Did I see your Councillor go? I did. Thank you.
We need to speak in a language. We need to speak in a language that the general public understand. And the monitoring officer has just reminded us, although we're well aware of it, that we are only considering this on material planning considerations. Now, to me, this issue is very cloudy already, with in the last 7 days having a briefing from the divisions. I've received a letter from Campus to Campus, all supporting the relocation to this particular site. And then on top of that, we read in our planning report, bearing in mind which should be material planning considerations only, we read in the report items that are not planning considerations, such as the mothers will find it helpful to be able to walk into the town from this site.
You're entering into, if we vote or if we don't, depending on that, you're entering into the reasons of the debate. I think Councillor Gale will have.
Well, I don't want to stray from that.
I was really asking was simply with the actual statement that you received at the weekend, was there any items that you were not clear about? It was precisely that item because, well, as you understand, as you will understand, we have the letter have been sent out by Campus, but we have no jurisdiction over it. So I really would ask you at this present moment to
ask your
question to the actual statement that you received both in email and hard copy form at the weekend. And if not, I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity for you to cover that. So do you have something of specific?
Yes. Why does the planning report actually contain information that is not a material planning consideration, but further clouds the issue?
That is not the actual, again, that is not relevant to what I'm asking. So we will, I'm sure, pick that up later if you will excuse me. Can I see if we have any other questions on this side? Now, Dr. River. And Councillor, well, no, I don't have questions. Councillor Baines.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would start by apologising to Council. As Chairman of your planning committee, I have had experience of planning for over 20 years. Members of the public may not be aware. The normal procedure is to have a briefing meeting with the planning officers before the day before the planning committee. I did not, at that meeting, despite realising how unusual this was, I did not ask for the presence of a monitoring officer or for legal advice. Therefore, I think it is partly my responsibility, Chairman, that we find ourselves in this very difficult predicament. My question is a very broad one, but if I may, Chairman, I will actually just itemise how I came to this from this document, which we received on Friday. I in fact received it hard copy on Saturday morning. It has given us very little time to digest the implications. I am asking the question, I am in real difficulty to know whether we are actually abiding by DC, development control procedure, or council procedure. I've seen what the monitoring officer said. I'm personally very uneasy because I think that we are well aware that if we go on to council procedure, it is 5 minutes, it is 3 key words. DC procedure is much more relaxed. Some people are very good, they're very articulate. Some people, with a very genuine point of view, may listen to somebody else making a point. If I can just go through lawfulness. If, and I listened to that very helpful elucidation of the point, if that is the case, then presumably everything that followed from that mistaken, unlawful decision the other Tuesday evening, including the referral up by 4 members of the DC, which is under the planning law, is invalid. If that is invalid, we should not be considering this tonight. And I think I have very real concerns about it. I'm not sure quite how we're doing. I've heard very clearly this. A lot of comment has been made about what we should have done. Leader has said, and I have just said myself, with hindsight, things might have been done differently. I'm not in the business of recrimination. We delegate by our constitution to the cabinet. I'm perfectly happy with what the cabinet decided. That is absolutely fine. We delegated it to them. Equally, this council delegated to the planning committee the responsibility for making that regulatory decision on planning matters. I think it has become inextricably confused. And what I would also say, what I would like to see this evening, Chairman, and I recognise the work that has gone in, and I recognise the interest, and I'm not getting aside of that. But there is a democratic benefit to have from this. If we don't decide tonight, but we come back later, and I have taken legal advice on this to some extent, it is untidy, democracy is untidy, but it is possible. That would give scrutiny the opportunity to look at the wider issues. It would give the consultation an opportunity.
I'm sorry, I wasn't allowing.
No, that's. I'm sorry, Chairman. I will not.
I'm really seeking. Have you a?
I have a question. I have a question, Chairman.
I would then take advice.
Yeah, I have a question in the sense that if we were to say it has been so inextricably, well, muddled, I would say, is my feeling. I particularly want to make the point, Chairman, and my original question, I said it was general, is that I feel personally confused about this. I find I have never had to decide the difference between benefits and that community benefit, which I think promptly widens the debate far further. There is the opportunity, it is complicated, but it could be done. And my personal feeling, and I'm far from supporting the suspension. My question is, can we go forward with in that, the way that I'm suggesting, legally?
Going to the chair to take some advice. the monitor officer said is going to reply to that question from Councillor Benz. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In the light of the circumstances around the planning application, which is the decision that's being asked to be made this evening, the only way in which that decision can now be made is by the full council. So yes, I do believe that you can go forward with the decision this evening in the way that I have set out in the advice that I've just given you.
Well, with respect, Kimber, that hasn't answered my question. I quite understood that we could proceed in that direction. What I'm asking is if we do not vote to suspend the particular item, can we then in fact move forward in a different way? Now, my understanding outside this meeting was that it was concluded that would be possible, and that was the force of my question. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Thank you. Thank you. Whilst the officers are deliberating, I noticed that one or two members of the public indicated that they would like to speak, but I'm afraid that is not possible. There is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions, which is being dealt with this evening, but you are not allowed, I'm afraid, now to join into the debate of which is the full council. This is a full council for elected members. Apologies, but that's how the system has to work.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. If the decision is to not suspend the procedure rules this evening, then I will be advising you not to continue the decision, because to do so would not be to act in accordance with the council's constitution and would not put the council into a lawful position. Hence my earlier advice that I was recommending in the strongest possible terms that to correct the position that you do approve the suspension of the procedure rules this evening.
Chairman, point of information.
Point of information. Point of information.
We've just informed the audience tonight. Sorry, Mike.
Can I just remind all members that it's not just for the public that you need to use your microphones, it's for the recording as well. So
okay, thank you. Yeah.
Point of information.
You've just informed the public that due to standard orders, they can't ask a question. And obviously, the gentleman over there's got an important question to ask. However, you're going to ask us to suspend standing orders, but you would suspend it for the public. Can you?
Not the same set of standing orders, Council. There is standing orders which are relevant to this council in process, and with respect to I think you know.
Democracy.
Right. Well, members, we have a proposal which I'm being asked to take. Do you want to speak, or you?
Chair, I'd like to propose that the council does suspend that procedure.
I'm looking for a second. Answer from there is next. A second. Thanks. So I have a proposal and I have a second. For clarity, I have a proposal and I have a second. The council suspend procedure rule 31(5)(d)(I) for the duration of this meeting in order to ensure that we are operating within our constitution. I ask for all those in favour. Against?
Could you record the point?
Nine, Chair.
Abstentions? None. Thank you. So that has been carried. Thank you, members. And I think Councillor King will now leave the chamber.
It'd be extremely helpful.
I was rather, I was going to do it at the end of agenda item 8, but is there? Would you like to continue? I am mindful that we do have quite a tight agenda, so I would prefer. it also interrupts the flow, if you don't mind. So my plan was get that, but I'm slightly later than yourself, so we will continue, please, if you don't mind. My way forward, members, from here, is that I will now take a brief overview by Mr. Hodgett, which is our normal procedure. I will then take the deputations, which I think will link in to that overview. Then we will go, as following DC, we will go to the full presentation by Mr. Hodgett. We will then go into debate mode in the normal fashion, and then I will take the proposal at the end of that, and then we can vote accordingly. So I'm going to... Yes, just to reiterate and reconfirm, we are operating under council chamber rules and not DC. But that's a way forward, which I think gives clarity to our members of the public as well. Councillor Oxley.
Just a question, are the board members to be given the opportunity to talk before we begin the debate as per DC?
I have considered that, and if they catch my eye, that will be doing. But there is going to be the full allocated time for everyone, and I think everyone would want to speak, or certainly a good member. I had considered that, but I think that will form naturally within the debate. Councillor Oxley, thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Hodgett to take us through, first of all, his overbrief, which also will help the members of the public. Thank you.
Chairman, we've got the screen here that's not going to be referred to. There are two screens in the side rooms which will be operated in front of you. So,
have you your microphone on there? Yes. Because they're having difficulty. That's better. If you could, thank you.
Just a brief overview of the proposal. This is a proposal to extend
sorry.
library.
You'll have to hold it. Can we find one to the mic up?
Sure.
There must be plenty of paperwork there.
There are enough papers. If you could lift that much closer to your... That's better. With the roving microphone.
On average 6.
Would members like the dogs to sat? Is that the much easier solution?
Right, that's the solution. No criticism intended. It's just we altered the room this evening, as everyone knows. Thank you. Not really, no. Can we try another mic? Because I don't think that was working. The one projected off. Yeah, I switched this one off. No. I think we have to have the roving mic. I'm sorry, that's probably the way can't hear us.
Right, is that better?
Yes. Wow. Excellent. Well done.
You're on the X Factor next week. Right. This is an application, a planning application to extend a library which is shown here in the black line. The proposed extension would be the area shown in red. It's on the southeast side of the existing library. Catmore Street is along the bottom here, and it extends to about 200 square metres, which you'll see there is approximately 35% increase in the floor area of the library itself. And I'm informed it replaces a facility elsewhere, which is 150 square metres, so it's a bit of an increase on what's there at the moment. That's a view of the library itself, taken shortly after it was built, I would imagine, because you can see the young trees that have been planted in there. And it shows the extent of flat roof around that building with the conical shape in the middle. And the red line there was, this plan was taken from the design access statement, shows the stone and wood wall, which remains there, which we'll look at later. So there's a view of the library as it was when it was built. That's a view of it today with the tree screen sort of maturing in front of it. This is a plan that sets out the context of the library site, and the extension would be here, and that shows the extent of the conservation area boundary with the purple dotted line. So everything on this side is within the conservation area, and everything this side is outside the conservation area, and the pink buildings there are the ones that are listed. And there's some views of the site as it was. We'll come back to those, but I just wanted to move on to the plan before we get to the deputation, so you can see what's proposed. That's the existing outline of the site. There are 7 parking spaces in there, an area of grass. There's a space that used to be used for the mobile library that you can see in the photograph at the top. That's no longer parked there, it's no longer used, it's stored at Oakham Enterprise Park prior to its sale. And there's an existing garage there which is used for the current mobile library. I'll come back to these. I'm just going to show you the plan. So this is a more detailed plan of the proposal itself. And if we just zoom in on that briefly, I'll leave this on the screen while the deputations take place. It shows the general sort of activity area, a wet play area, clinic, a staff and admin area. And the entrance is here adjacent to the existing library building. And it would provide a single access into the library and then access through 2 sets of doors here into the main area. And to the rear, enclosed by the existing walls of the library site, is a play area. And as you've seen in the addendum, there's a revised plan now that removes any parking from that area where there were 2 spaces previously shown, and it puts a wall and some gates across that opening out onto Bull Lane at the top. That's a brief overview, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hodgson. We will, as I explained, received. The first deputation is from Mrs. Lucas, and we're going to get you the roving microphone, Mrs. Lucas. You have 3 minutes to present your deputation. We, at the council, as the agent and the deputation, will have 3 minutes to respond, and then we are allowing 4 minutes from members of the council to ask members of both the deputation and the applicant stroke agent. Mrs. Lucas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for giving me time to voice my opinion and the opinion of many residents of this town. Also, thank you to the member who sent me a 5-page missive of why the application should be approved and the range of services Vision has to offer. Reading page 1, quote, "The children's team provides space at Catmus each week for the following health service: weekly antenatal clinic for midwives and health visitors, antenatal support group for prospective parents, and a breastfeeding support group. Then there are a range of support programs for young babies, toddlers and parents, and development assessment clinics. This has nothing whatsoever to do with a library service. 60% of what is on offer is not centred around library usage. Only 2 sessions each week of anything to do with books and reading ability. Much has been said about the parking difficulties, and I'm sure there'll be more comments will be made on this subject. The whole extension looks like an add-on box, and is to be built in a conservation area. When Oakham in Bloom began, I was told by the then conservation officer, that the grey cob wall surrounding the Peacock area was listed, and we had to have a Rutland County Council officer to oversee the work. This I duly arranged and work began. 2 seats were replaced, one by a past mayor of this town and one by Oakham and Broome member in memory of his wife. Oakham Town Council have maintained these seats ever since. The seats are well used by townsfolk, visitors alike, and the area is a pleasant space to read the daily paper, to sit and chat, or to watch the world go by. I note that the centre encompasses the whole of Rutland. So I ask the question, why Oakham? Why not another town or village? Once this building is in place, there is no turning back. If user numbers dwindle, then we have yet one more white elephant in this lovely town. The application, if granted, is another dreadful example of the destruction by this authority of a space in a conservation area. It is my and many residents' opinion a short-term gain for a long-term loss. I ask members to reject this application on the grounds of pedestrian safety and an inappropriate building in a conservation area. And I respectfully ask members to look for an alternative site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We're going to have the reply from Mr. Clayton. In fact, Mr. Clayton is going to be replying, I understand, to all the deputations.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to respond for the applicant. Delivering library and children's centre services from one site has been very successfully undertaken in many counties. It is now regarded nationally as good practice, which brings users to both services in one convenient location. The proposed design does not reduce library floor space and will provide independent access to each building with a single interconnecting door, which would allow for integration and segregation of activities as appropriate. Turning to the conservation area and the cob wall, the application for the extension to the library building is within the conservation area. Pre-planning advice was sought in relation to the design, and we have followed the advice given. The Children's Centre cannot be seen from Alden Close and is partially screened behind the trees on Capel Street. The design is intended to complement the existing library building. The proposed site of the Children's Centre is a staff-only car park with very few merits. We agree that the cob wall is an important part of our heritage. Although it is not listed, we have carefully designed the proposed building to make sure that the wall is entirely retained and that the Peacock Garden is not changed. Given these points, the planning officer has concluded that there is some impact, but this is outweighed by public benefit. We see the benefits as increased capacity, a 33% increase in the size of the Children's Centre, provision of a supervised outdoor area, which the current centre lacks, flexible spaces for both the library and Children's Centre, which will support the sustainability of both, less traffic on Bull Lane, as there will no longer be any staff car parking at the rear of the library site. We would therefore argue the impact on the surrounding area is minimal. Regarding the choice of Oakham as a location, as the county town, it is by far the most accessible and closest to a significant proportion of the population, and the associated amenities, including the facilities that families use on a regular basis, such as the shops, post offices and chemists. As a minor point, undertaking the building works at the same time as refurbishing the library gives us an opportunity to maximise efficiencies by having a single set of contractors on site at one time. In terms of pedestrian safety, we'll come back to this, I'm sure, but the Highways Authority has raised no objections.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. Thank you. Members, do we have any questions?
Chairman, can I just ask Mr. Clayton to
I'm sorry, not.
slow down, because I can't
Oh,
hear
right.
it's gambling. I have a word to say. Sorry, Robert.
I'm sure Mr. Clayton would take notice of that going forward. We do have time constraints. Members, do we have a question of either Mrs. Lucas or Councillor Lamey, followed by Councillor Newton?
Yes.
Councillor
Thank you, Jay. It's just a question to Mrs. Lucas.
When you're addressing, sorry, I should have said, when you're addressing Mrs. Lucas, we'll help her if she can read your lips basically also.
It's, just during your speech, you do comment that the site is too dangerous for pedestrians to use. If that is the case, then I would ask, why is the town council upkeeping and supporting benches on the site which users would have to walk to? It seems contradictory.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not used to all this little electronics, as you know. Well, I have to say that is quite a blinded question. These are young children. These are not the elderly. These are not the visitors that are using these seats at the back of the library. These are mothers and toddlers, and sometimes multiple toddlers, I have to say, because we've had Facebook going mad this week. This is an issue for mothers or fathers or parents, to be absolutely precise, that will have to guide push chairs and very small children, toddlers I'm talking about. We're not talking about those people who are reading the newspapers. Thank you.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Payton. You comment on other sites. Sorry. You comment on other sites where a children's centre has been combined with a library. Do you know whether that's resulted in an increased uptake in the Book Start programme?
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. This kind of scheme has been used extensively in Northamptonshire libraries. We've seen a big increase in the number of children participating in all of their reading programmes, including the Book Start scheme.
Are there any other
I'm
questions?
confused, Chairman. This is, none of these is to do with the planning application.
No. Yes, I'll have a response from legal. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillor, you're quite right, we are looking at material planning considerations, but as you may be aware, often when we have questions from members of the public at deputations, we will allow those members of the public to raise all matters that are of concern to them and respond, and applicants can respond to those questions. But certainly when we're looking at debate, if there are any non-material matters that members are looking to consider, I will of course advise on that. But for the purposes of openness and transparency, we are keen that members of the public can get across all of their points this evening.
Thank you.
So I'm intending then, members, to move on to deputation. We have 1 minute, Councillor Collier. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Just in response to...
The question is to who?
Oh, sorry, it's to Mr. Lucas, and it's really a reiteration of the actual state of safety in that area. Appendix 2 to the report actually lists the number of incidents or accidents over the past 10 years, and they are very limited in number and in severity in
I
that
think
area.
that's a statement more so, Mr. Conway, as opposed to the question with respect.
And
also
would
we
you
are
understand...
time, but we are timed out now, I think. Thank you. So I'm going to go on to deputation. The second deputation is from the Rutland Schools Federation. We have the roving mic available. Thank you. We have 3 minutes as in the normal procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of Campus College, which is part of the Rutland District Schools Federation, and I'd like to speak in support of the application. The current provision for visions at Campus is inadequate. There is no outside provision for the children. There is little space for the pushchairs, and almost no natural light given its location underneath the mezzanine. There was a compromised space when the building was completed, and has become more constrained since as the public cafe outside is now the college refectory. This means that breastfeeding mums are overlooked by teenage students, or a blind needs to be permanently drawn down, making the space even more dependent on artificial light. Young babies and expectant mothers need our best care and provision at the centre of their community rather than the current compromised space as part of a secondary school. The library conversion is in the centre of town and therefore ideal. It would be easier for parents to access without cars. It would introduce children and parents to the library from a very early age, which would increase access to this important public service. It would also offer babies the opportunity to benefit from an outside space, something which is critical to the success of the children's centre such as Visions, and its current location it's impossible. The space vacated by Visions is also critical to allow Catmos College to continue to increase the number of children we admit. In the last 2 years, we have increased the students being admitted from 180 to 210 per year. This has allowed us to better meet local demand for places. We have managed this thanks to the relocation of adult learning, but have now reached the point where without additional office and classroom space, we will need to revert to an intake of 180. This means that around an additional 30 students, a total of 70, who are local to Rutland will be declined to place most likely, a position which I think would agree is unacceptable. These are children who live in local villages such as Wissendine, Market Overton, Langham and Cottesmore, who are just a few miles from the college. This is a result of the significant number of new houses which are beyond our control that have been built in Oakham, that have been built very close to the college. The Visions were to move as a result of this planning application being agreed that the college would increase its planned admission number to 210. This would secure the adequate secondary places locally at very low cost to the taxpayer, and free up capital money to be spent on other schools locally. The council will need to find transport for any students that are refused to school a number of miles away, splitting them from their friends who attend the same primary and wasting valuable resources and time travelling on buses. In the medium term, the situation is only going to get worse as more housing is built and the college will need a new building to meet demand from Rutland. This will cost considerably more than the refurbishment of Visions. The Vision space will provide a much needed life skills room and cooking facility for our special provision. We currently have no access to such a provision. It will give us an additional much needed classroom for college students. There will be space for our reprographics facility, which is currently in a disabled toilet. It will allow our finance team and site manager who are currently located off-site to come back into the college building so they can be accessed by staff and students. I have no doubt that moving Visions will have some impact on local residents, but believe this can be managed through a parking scheme. I value the conservation area, but building could be designed to be in keeping with the library and the rest of this area and minimise the impact. The move, that's okay, I'm nearly there. The move will have, on the other hand, significant benefits to over 1,000 students and their parents who are a key part of the future of Rutland. It will give their babies and their parents who attend Visions a far more appropriate space that will give them the best possible start in life. It is for these reasons that the Federation supports this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond, and apologies for speaking so quickly before. We would simply wish to echo Mr. Williams' comments and draw attention to the positive impact that the proposal will have on the increased availability of much needed school spaces and address the shortcomings of the current centre.
Members, do we have questions to Mr. Williams? I saw Mr. Gale first. Apologies. And then I will take Mr. Waters and, sorry.
I'm not indicating.
You're there, thank you.
Mr. Williams, I totally agree with every word.
But your mic is no longer, you said.
Mr. Williams, I totally agree with every word you just said. But this has not happened overnight. The situation has not happened overnight. What have you done to contact the council or your ward members about the problem you're facing?
Mr. Williams, thank you.
Yeah, we've been in communication with the council officers for a number of years on this matter. No, sorry, I'll say that again. We've been in contact with the council officers for a number of years on this matter. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Waters. This is a question for Mr. Williams.
Thank you. If I may. We've heard talk of the benefit of combining these two facilities. Using Mr. Williams' specialist knowledge, could he give us an indication of the validity of that claim with children this age being attached next to that library and their likely uptake? What particular knowledge can you spread to us?
I can only express my personal view. My personal view is the sooner children start accessing the library, the better, and the sooner they're reading, the better.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, Mr. Williams, I would entirely agree with your point from the principal of Catmos and all of those points, but have you had the opportunity to assess the merits of other possible sites? I heard a lot about what it would mean for Catmos, but not a lot why this site in particular should be preferred.
Mr. Williams again, thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't think I'm in a position to comment on where Vision should go. I think that's a matter for the council only. All I can say is what I've already said, which is that I think the location of the centre of Oakham is better than in Catmus campus, which has got very restricted parking, which has increased as an issue over the years. It will become more central to the town, which is where children and their parents should be, rather than periphery with teenagers where they probably shouldn't have been in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Before I move to the next item. Okay, thank you. I will now move to deputation, the third deputation, which is from Oakham Town Council.
Thank you, Chairman and members. First of all, can I indicate that this deputation has been written by Oakham Town Council with the input from some residents and most councillors. It is not my deputation. Oakham Town Council recommended refusal of the library extension in September on the basis of lack of future expansion opportunities, inadequate parking for staff, concerns over visitors' drop-off points. National agreed policy for building work in conservation areas appear not to apply now, which is not in keeping with the Oakham Town Plan, and this would set out a precedent for future applications moving forward if the correct decision to refuse is now overturned. Rutland County Council also refused the application in line with planning guidelines. Unless there are undisclosed significant reasons this decision should not be overturned, RCC councillors represent residents, and the views and opinions of these residents should be taken into consideration, and other unrelated policies should not be allowed to cloud the issue. The majority of residents applauded the decision to refuse this application, and it is now echoing in the streets of the town, being spoken about in the coffee shops and written about in our own local papers. Why is this decision being revisited? Car parking in the original planning application has illustrated that people will have to use several already overstretched town centre car parks and across busy roads to reach the site. There are no safe, controlled pedestrian crossing points from those locations to the library. There is not an appropriate location for a safe drop-off point. Congestion and a traffic pedestrian risk is already a concern at other schools, and this is a very busy street. The County Council have constantly reviewed and instigated various traffic controls in the area. Is all that to be undermined by now adding to the congestion that will follow? The location of the play area in a congested town centre where such a concentration of exhaust fumes suggests that the welfare should be a consideration as an addition for refusal as well. Residents' concerns over noise from a play area which is within 6 metres of their homes rather than the suggested 30 metres should not be drowned out now by bureaucracy. The peaceful garden adjacent to the site, where even County Council employees are known to capture a moment of rest and relaxation at lunchtime, would no longer be a sanctuary. The town councillors and the people of Oakham who represent supported and applauded the decision to reject this application. I'm on the last sentence. Sorry, you put me off. Right. The town councillors and the people of Oakham support the elected RCC Oakham Ward councillors in upholding the original decision, and we are asking other RCC councillors to also now reject the planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will go straight to Mr. Clayton. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. We note that when Oakham Town Council considered the application on the 29th of September, as you set out, the grounds for refusal were the lack of future expansion, inadequate parking for staff, visitors and drop-off areas. Regarding the concern over future expansion, this isn't a planning consideration. However, the application significantly increases the floor space for the children's centre and the associated communities. Staff parking will be provided at the recently expanded car park here at Camps. It is sufficient for all staff and is within easy walking distance. However, a further increase of capacity within the car park's existing footprint is also planned and will ensure that there is no net loss of parking provision within the town. For users of the service, 10 dedicated spaces will be available in the museum car park. Turning to drop-offs, the way that children's centres operate makes drop-offs unlikely, as children are accompanied by their parents or carers throughout their visit, which tends to be for 1 or 2 hour sessions. We believe that drop-off on Bull Lane in particular is unlikely, as it is on the opposite side from the facility entrance and families would have to walk all the way around the library to access the service. Regarding pedestrian safety, the Highways Authority have raised no objections and have highlighted that despite existing high use of the library by children and families, there have been no related accidents. As I previously mentioned, ride time at the library attracts a significant number of families with no traffic disruption. And for context, the open library attracts around 90,000 visitors a year, a very large number of people which we've not had any issues with previously. In relation to exhaust fumes, this comment would equally apply to any recreational area in the town centre, including the Peacock Garden next to the facility. We have looked into this issue further, and the 2015 assessment of local air quality has not identified any concerns relating to air quality in this area, and in fact notes an improvement in air quality since the opening of the bypass for this location. The proposed supervised outdoor activity area is surrounded by a 6-foot high wall and is somewhere away from moving traffic. Finally, regarding concerns about potential noise, the majority of children that use the centre are under 2 years of age. The Peacock Garden itself is used by all ages, including children, as a recreational area, and is next to a mini roundabout with no screening. We don't therefore believe there will be any significant increase in noise caused by the development. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Hawkins, and your question is
Mr. Brooks, Chairman. Mr. Graham has actually stolen my thunder, but just on the issue of noise, is it such a great criminal act if someone sitting in Pleasant Gardens hears some 0 to 2 year olds playing and laughing and giggling? And if so, will Oakham Town Council put that sign on all its parks?
I'm not sure.
Unfortunately, Chairman, I was only given authority to read the deputation, and Councillor, I would be in breach of code of conduct if I answered a question unilaterally on behalf of Oakham Town Council. But on a personal basis, Mr. Waters, I don't think they would do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Members, any other questions? If not, I will move to the 4th deputation. So the 4th deputation is from Mr. Woodley on behalf of residents. Mr. Woodley.
So, the Development and Licensing Committee expressed concerns which we echo for the refusal of the proposal to be upheld, subject to your changes of your conditions earlier. We believe that the agenda item 8, which is to approve the planning application, has a flawed conclusion, and we draw your attention to the following items. Section 3, design and impact on conservation area. 3.1, parapet roof, even though it is stated is not visible, it is in fact still there and therefore contrary to recommendation. 3.2, 2 wrongs don't make a right, and extending the use of cladding will set a precedent for other residents to use this material in the conservation area. 3.3 and 3.4. As has been seen through the installation of the temporary simulated extension, the site clearly is visible from the street scene. The deciduous trees do not screen adequately during autumn and winter, and neither does the stone/mud wall, as it is visible above the wall from the open space on the corner of Stamford Road. 3.5. While we note the changes, it does not address the concerns about an adequate dropping off area. Section 4. Conservation advisors specific comments. Section 72 of the Planning Act 1990. The acknowledged harm by this proposal does not outweigh the public benefit, as the proposal targets a low facility usage of 9 to 15 users in 2 2-hour sessions a day. As the conservation advisor is unable to visualise the materials and construction as per plan, it is unfair for the public and elected members to adequately assess the suitability. Section 5. Highway safety. The proposed parking facility at the museum, though 120 metres and one main crossing away, exposes mothers with young children and modern-sized buggies to an exaggerated risk due to the lack of site suitability for on-site parking. Section 5.2. Supervision does not diminish the risk from the lack of on-site parking. 5.3. We anticipate an increase in traffic accessing and exiting Bull Lane due to supporting deliveries and drop-offs. 5.7. Accident records highlighted a number of recorded accidents that are due to carelessness, recklessness and excessive speed. This is in direct contradiction to this being a low-risk area for the public. Clearly, the lack of a speed survey demonstrates a lack of due diligence in the submission as evidence. Absence of zebra crossing site suitability does not remove the need for a zebra crossing to protect the public. Parking. The lack of a quick fix, as referenced, does not provide safeguarding for the public. 5.8. The evidence in the form of accident reports with no other evidence-based assessment actually highlights the safety concerns for refusal. And finally, the formal objections to the planning do not reflect the actual opposition felt by the general community. We would like the elected members to consider that when you have choices that seem hard to make, listen to the will of the people, and the choices are always easy.
Thank you very much. I think most of the points that you've raised have been covered previously. I would say, in terms of the issue that you raised around the setting of precedents for the residents in terms of planning applications, clearly the purpose of the planning committee is to sit and view every application on its merits. So I hope everyone understands that's the way that is done. And also your other point about the fact that the centre won't be completely screened by the trees and stone mud wall. Absolutely not the case. That the intention is that the facility will be totally invisible. Clearly, parents and public need to know where it is. But we've tried to blend it into the surroundings as best we can. But hopefully that's something that will be discussed later. Thank you very much.
Do we have questions? No? Okay, thank you. Therefore, I'm going to now move to the full presentation from Mr.
We've got very clear policies and objectives, and they're written down for us all to read. I'd like to quote from some of them, which is, the first one is the Spatial Strategy Objective 1, which states we should promote the efficient use of land while protecting the natural environment, heritage landscaping and the unique character, identity of towns and villages in the countryside. Objective 12, we further state we should protect and enhance our built environment and open spaces, historic environment and local townscape associated with historic forward and market towns, listed buildings and conservation areas. We'd like to bear that in mind. Policy CS19, promoting good design. I have to be honest, I came along with an open mind as to what my decision would be. I wanted to listen to everybody. But I have to say, in my opinion, a wooden box doesn't really typify good design. I think there would be better alternatives. And the issue of a flat roof has been raised many times. If that construction had a pitched roof to match the pitch of the library, maybe we should view it in a different way. but that isn't the proposal, and that's not what we're looking at. Policy SB20 states, development in a conservation area will only be acceptable where the scale and siting of the development would preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the area, and the development will not be acceptable if it has an adverse effect on the street scene. Item 3, views into and out of the area, and item 5, important spaces. Again, I'm reading what is in our policies and strategical objectives. We've all heard that the library site was stripped of its original character in 1975 when the library was built. In my opinion, and I've not heard anything to sway me against it, just because that site was stripped of the majority of its historic identity does not mean we should carry on the process. As Councillor Conley said, there are lots of examples within Oakham of developments which now have flown in the face of all ideas of conservation. We don't need to mention them, there are so many of them. My point is a simple one. A time has to come when we stop this sort of development, where we say, no, what's left we do need to maintain, to conserve, to look after. And another link in the chain, in my opinion, doesn't justify it. So, when I stood for election, this was one of the main reasons I stood. Because I, like many other people, was tired of inappropriate development in Oakham, stripping away the heritage character, the assets that we have. This is a small part, it's a small cog in the overall mechanism, but it is another one, and it is stripping out another bit of value from the heritage centre of the town. Thank you, Chair.
Members of the public, I know we have great interest in this, but I have to conduct this meeting broadly in the council. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Burton. I wasn't sure if that was your hand, Councillor Cross. Sorry.
So no, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Bird, and I'm just like,
you take your microphone off.
I'd just like to agree with what Councillor Bird said, and the idea and what the officer was saying about the vandalism that occurred when we knocked those buildings down originally, and what people are going to think in the future. That was our opinion now. We look at that and think, how did that happen? What are people going to look back in the future and think, how did we, extend an already ugly building? There is no alternative. We could be really visionary and think, let's redevelop that site, get rid of the library, and put something back there that's even better. I mean, you could even incorporate the library and the children's centre, but in a better design. Why do we've only got to look at that ugly building and extend that building? There must be alternatives that we can look at in order to kind of put back the damage that's already been done. And so that people in the future can look back and see that, we were sympathetic and understand the aesthetic value of the town. It benefits everyone, even the children. If we start chipping away at that, we lose something very precious.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies to Councillor Stevenson there. I have a couple of questions and an observation, really. The proposal we've got before us is slightly different from that which went to DC, Development Control and Planning Committee. And therefore, my first question is, we haven't heard what the impact on users or staff will be of the loss of the two parking spaces that are result as far as the gates are concerned. My second question, I guess, and I think it's probably a rhetorical one, this one. How can the report in paragraph 4.2 assert I'm quoting, the clear public benefit that would accrue from the building is sufficient to outweigh any impact. When the conservation officer's comments do not come to this conclusion, and whilst I fully acknowledge that the Children's Centre is an extremely valuable provision, there's nothing in the report to say, and it couldn't possibly go anywhere else, which to me would be the public value. And also, as other councillors have said, we have a pretty ugly building here. Oh, let's make it uglier by adding to it. When, as Councillor Burkitt rightly said, why didn't we have a completely new proposal? Thirdly, we've got mentioned in the report various comments about finishes that would finishes to the building that would make it more acceptable. How do we know? We've not seen any of these. We're not being offered the chance to talk about these prior to approval. So I've got concerns and questions over that. Questions in my mind, that is. And then finally, is my observation is that we wouldn't be considering this tonight had the initial proposal been discussed in an open forum, for example, through the scrutiny process prior to the Cabinet decision. And I'd hope that in future, scrutiny panel chairs will consider the Council's forward plan far more carefully to ensure this type of situation does not occur again. And further, I would urge portfolio holders to alert scrutiny chairs to potential forward plan items before they reach the forward plan to avoid the timeline problems where Cabinet meets before the relevant scrutiny panel. Thank you.
Mr. Project, would you like to respond? I think Councillor started off with a dealing with the slight variation. And as to the materials, I think is that not covered within a condition within the actual proposal?
Yes, Chairman, it's been clearly stated that the finished material on the exterior of the building would be vertical cedar cladding, which is quite a well-known material, but nevertheless, the details would be for final approval by the condition. Some of the other points raised by Councillor Warren are not really planning considerations. The impact on the loss of spaces for staff, for instance, and the latter comments about how the application was arrived at with regard to the internal council procedures, but are not planning matters as we've alluded to before. With regard to the impact on the area and the outweighing of the public benefit outweighing the harm, the conservation officer was fairly ambivalent about that. He did state at the outset that he didn't think it was necessarily an appropriate material, but the conservation officer is just one consultee in the planning process, and at the end of the process, officers have to round up the various comments that have been made by members of the public and other officers, and we have to come to a conclusion. And on this occasion, we've concluded that the design and the materials are acceptable.
Thanks, Mr. So obviously, Councillor, that was the question within your sound. So if you're content with that, thank you very much. I'm just around the room because it's not very much. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Well, I'll take Councillor Baines as I'm very missing to the left. Councillor Baines.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. 4 planning issues, and they are pure straightforward. The principles that we go on are things that can be measured and things that we are asked as a development control committee to, as we're sitting now, to give our opinion. Not our opinion as architects or surveyors or planners, but our opinion as laymen. And we're also here as elected members to represent, not necessarily to agree with, but to represent the views of our community. I'm sorry that the Oakham Neighbourhood Plan isn't further advanced, because that would give a wider consultation to the town. It isn't. So I shall listen with great attention to what the Oakham members say, if they're representing their thing. 4 issues. Amenity, non-starter, you can measure it, it's not near enough, no problem. You can't refuse this on amenity grounds. Highways, we've heard the opinion of the officers, it can be measured, we've heard that again tonight reiterated. We would be very, very unwise to refuse this on highways grounds. You may well feel, as I feel, that the policy is an urban policy that has been applied to a market town. You may well feel there's a flaw in the logic. If this is where people can walk and use public transport, what are we bothering about parking for? We're trying to stop them getting in cars, as far as I see. In fact, the users of this thing mainly seem to come in cars, neither here nor there. That's irrelevant. So we come to design, and we come to the impact on the conservation area against the actual benefit. Now, originally, and this is why I made the point about how many, the printed error, if you like, on the page, how many on conservation officers. Because at the original DC meeting, the conservation officer was nothing like as vigorously against as he seems to be here. If I can quote you from the actual planning guidance of extensions, the extension will be expected to respect its wider surroundings, the street scene, in terms of scale, position, design, and building material. Any extension in the conservation area must preserve or enhance the area and not detract from it. Viewed in relation to a listed building, it must be sympathetic to that building and its setting. As far as the shape and form, it should reflect the shape and form of the original, and asymmetric, flat and shallow roof extensions are really harmonious. I don't think there can be any ambiguity about that. On the original preamble to the DC report, the comment was that it was marginal. I'm not picking up on what the officer said tonight, but interestingly, he didn't use the term marginal, he said minimal. Now, I would say that is a distinct difference. Marginal is Brexit, is the American presidential election. How do you judge marginal? 40%? 49%, 51%, 70%, 30%. I don't know. It's a very ambiguous thing, but we're shifting away. If you look at the actual impact, I said at DC, and I'll say again, I'm possibly the only person here who can remember sitting around this table, who can remember what that looked like. Mr. Dale? Yes, thank you. And I'm running out of time. I want very quickly to say that we have a great 2-star listed building. It is 50 yards away. I pasted it out last night. There is, in my opinion, a decided impact, not to harm the area. You can't decide whether something should be in a conservation area or not. The library, if that's there, you can measure that. You can't say, oh, we don't like a building, we should be in a conservation area. It is there in a conservation area. And if you're saying the library is a monstrosity, if you look at this report, and I'm sorry I'm running out of time, which is why I would have preferred that we had the earlier thing on Prolix, I'm afraid. This is actually not clear that it is a huge benefit. If you look at the consultation thing, you can't consult widely on the planning issue, you should on the other issues. I don't think you can assess the benefits, this has been my problem the whole time. How do you assess benefits from one sector of the community? If you once build something, I think you've actually ruined even further a good market town. Chairman, I've heard nothing tonight that makes me feel that I can support this proposal. I think it is flawed. I think it is ill-conceived as a design. I think that the issue on the integrated services is a completely separate one. We've been told it time and again, but I've heard tonight. Yes, thank you, Jim. I understand that.
Thank you, Chair. I came here this evening with a completely balanced view of this, which is why there is no speech written. I mean this sincerely and malice. The best speech of the day was going to Mr. Bird, and I appreciate everything he said. However, the speeches that persuade me are from Councillor McGuff and Councillor Matthias. I was already aware of the huge public potential benefit of relocating to the library. It had not occurred to me the benefit given to the existing users of the library by moving some of the services into the new centre. I think that is quite telling. I also think Councillor Matthias is quite right when he questions whether that part of the conservation area is actually the sort of thing we necessarily want to conserve. I'm taking words from his mouth and rewording them, so perhaps that isn't quite what he meant. In terms of Mr. Baines, I think the reference to flat roofs might be more, you're the expert, but I think that might more apply to applying a flat roof for extension to a Georgian mansion rather than the area we're looking at now. So what would I do? How would I vote? Well, if there was an existing 100-year-old thatched cottage there, would I allow us to demolish it and replace it with this extension? No, I wouldn't. If we could turn the clock back 40 years, would I vote to knock down all the original buildings and replace it with a library? No, I wouldn't. But what we actually have here, by and large, is a pretty rough and ready sort of car park and a bit of ground next to it, against which we balance as carefully as we can the public benefit of having this new facility on this site, with the extra benefit of making both the library and the vision centres both more sustainable and of greater benefit to the children, to the parents, and as we've heard, to the existing library users. So, on balance, I've heard it said this evening, some decisions are hard, and how we make those hard decisions, sometimes it means we have to go against the wishes of the majority of the people in the audience, and that is always very difficult. But I'm convinced personally, unless someone comes out with something in the next few minutes or hours or however long this takes, at the moment I'm convinced the public benefit outweighs the marginal, when we measure that, impact on the conservation area. And that's all I have to say, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, members are not seeing up area has. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Probably not as eloquent as some have spoken already. But I would like to support what Councillor Bird has said and Councillor Baines. Having come into Oakham for the last 50 odd years, I can remember the old road, I can remember when the library was built. It's in isolation. To my mind, out of all the high streets of Oakham, that part is the most important for open space. You've got the isolation of the building, but you've got air around it, you've got visibility around it. We're talking about doubling the frontage of the library on Clapham Street. And to my mind, that is going to be one step too far. I want to support it very, very much, but I do think that we've got to look at it as the impact on the conservation area. Two wrongs don't make a right. What was built in 74 is there. We can't do that. But let's make sure, and I've said this once before, Mr. Chairman, at the planning meeting, we only get one chance, but let's get it right.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gale's
Here I am, standing up for. I'll keep this short. We've been here for a very long time. The value we place on the conservation area needs to be viewed not just in the short term, but in the long term. I fear that by approving this application, we compound the aesthetic errors of a previous generation of planners, which will be suffered by future generations of Rutland. And as such, I really do have difficulty supporting this application on the grounds of the conservation area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Are you Councillor Cross?
Mr. Chairman, as usual, I just speech to say before I start. Anything I might say are my own views. If they upset anybody, well, tonight is just too bad. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the previous...
I think that's only vital for how we conduct ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always try to think very, very carefully about any words I might say in this chamber and elsewhere. At the previous planning meeting, I questioned the size of this extension against the existing building as viewed from Catmore Street. I said this is doubling the facade. I was actually told that I was incorrect. For a start off, I would like some explanation as to the extra length that will now be imposed upon the Catmore Street seam.
I'm not sure that it is an extra length. I thought that Mr. Hodge explained that the scaffolding was oversized, but Mr. Hodge.
Chairman, it really depends on where you take these measurements, and I'll just go back through to the plan of the building. As I explained earlier, the existing building there is approximately just over 18 metres, plus 4.8 metres in that position, which makes approximately 22 metres in total width of the building. The extension beyond the side wall of the library is 14.5. The overall extension is 19. So the overall extension is less than the overall width of the library. If you take the extension as a percentage of that section of the library, then yes, it does more than double it. But you can measure it in several different places and come to a different conclusion. But those are the facts of what it is. Whether it doubles it is not necessarily a reason for accusing planning permission in any event, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. Having been put down at the planning meeting to say that it had not been doubled in length, I accept the new admission that we are doubling the facade of this ugly building. History. Do we learn from history? Extraordinary, here we have just gone through Remembrance Sunday. At this council, we sit in a building here tonight. We have a library across the way, both designed and built by this council. And here before us tonight, we have a further building designed by this council in our beloved county town of Oakham. What we have at the moment in the library is there, in my view, Mr. Chairman, to compound that by increasing that length in that conservation area does we councillors no good. We have had mention of the use of the Vision Centre, and I had the pleasure to go to the Vision Centre. You will bear with me, Mr. Chairman. Young children with their mothers, bathed in arms. We had the headmaster of Catmore College saying how important it was to have these children at the library. Not one of those children picked up a copy of Shakespeare. Now, how they expect young babes in arms to make use of the library, how breastfeeding will be integrated into the library services is quite beyond me, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm going to sit down before I do say something like that.
I'm the longest serving county councillor around the table tonight. And I like to put that down to, I listen to the public and I extend their views to the council meetings. Tonight we've been told that the town's representatives, I refer to the town council, opposed the application. I know that the local residents who have approached me oppose the development, and I've received an email from parents, existing parents that use the facility at its current location, that don't want a new site unless there is on-site free parking. We know we can't provide that. We know that there are 4 council-owned car parks within 200 metres. These are all paid parking. I'm well aware that there's going to be some free parking, but I do see that parents will be going round and round in circles to find somewhere to park. Going on to conservation and listed buildings. Having probably been to as many meetings as our current chairman, I feel that if this application had been by someone who's a member of the public, we wouldn't have been quite so lenient as what we've heard tonight, and I think it would have been refused. I see no difference in this application, whether it's a council application or a public application. It's going to be harmful, and I think enough has been said about that. Oakham needs car parking. We've been desperate for car parking for many years. The population of Oakham is growing considerably, and this will remove spaces. Okay, we talk about additional spaces, but I cannot see young parents with children walking from the bottom end of our council car park. Public facility. If we're going to develop this stuff, we've got to make the best use of the public money that goes into it. And I don't see with the restrictions put on to this development where we'll achieve that. Unfortunately, as Councillor Wallace stated earlier, this didn't go before any scrutiny panel. And that's where we as a council have failed. Amenity. We don't know how to affect amenity. We do know that Bull Lane may be used for parking if someone uses it. If the new building is used in the evening, it's quite possible that Bull Lane will become a parking area. I think that ties it all up. I'm really opposing this because of the harm on the conservation area, because I don't think we thought the planning issues out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to what my fellow members and members of the public have actually said today. And I think, for me, it's a bit difficult. Because actually, I've grown up with this building that everybody has been bashing tonight. So I actually look at it and don't see the ugly building that quite a lot of others see. It's actually part of my heritage. So before we go around bashing that's actually sitting in your conservation area, and that's my heritage that actually we've got to be careful about. So we are also talking about parents, children, and we've heard from members of the public, but we've not necessarily heard from parents with children, and maybe that's our fault in some respects, having a meeting at this time of the evening, that they couldn't come and actually make comments to us and actually hear what they want to say. Although I have, as a councillor, and as the chair in the Health and Wellbeing Board, actually spoken to parents. So in very much, the benefit is there. And I take on board Councillor Cross's points in some respects of his not understanding what some of the benefit would be from having breastfeeding classes, etc., happening in this building. But actually, I would then go on to say those parents deserve access to the job search facilities that are in the room next door. So once they've done that, they can actually move on and get a job. So the benefit isn't confined just to the activities that enter the building. Parking, we've heard about, and I have to actually say, you've heard tonight about actually the fact that the parking, the officers have already identified enough that will actually take the place of that. So I find it very difficult to actually listen to everybody and say that we have to refuse this because of the impact it's going to have on a conservation area. We are talking about a building on a car park, or 7 cars, and a bit of grass. Now, I can absolutely understand the views that have been actually said, but actually look at it the other way. If you stand on Catford Street, all I see is a little bit of wall and a horrible white wall in the background. But actually, if this goes ahead, going to disappear. It could actually be seen as an improvement to that end of town. And it is all down to somebody's perspective. So we've got to be really careful. Are the true grounds to refuse this on? Is it actually having such a harmful impact that the community benefit does not outweigh that? And I would remind everybody, we are doing this on those planning items. We're not looking at anything else, and I would hope everybody does it on that basis. Thank you very much.
Councillor Clinton, I will be shortly calling for an extension to time, but I will just take Councillor Thomas first of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 points really on material considerations. One is the design. I'm not convinced this is a good addition to our town centre. To quote Sarah Palin, I think it was, and put lipstick on a pig, it's going to be. My other concern, I have spoken to parents. Myself and a couple of councillors here actually went along to Visions last week. I have no doubt that there is a need for it to move. Is it the right place? That's a different question. But speaking to those parents face to face, they have real concerns about adequate parking. What do I mean by adequate parking? Not just the parking spaces, because these days with all the hundreds of pounds you pay for a buggy, that's getting the kids in and out of cars, a normal parking space isn't good enough. So 10 parking spaces, invariably 6 parking spaces. Two of the parents did say they actually live in the town and can walk, so that's good. 2 said that they have serious concerns and would debate on whether they would come. 2 said that if they couldn't get into an adequate parking space, they would park farther out and walk in because of the valuable service. But their perception was it's then much more hazardous for themselves and their children. So on that parking, highway safety, and I know the perception can't be measured, but if our service users have that concern, then we must feel that concern for them and say it here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mathias, I think if you want to apply for an extension of time, because we will do that.
Yes, Chair, I would like to apply for an extension of time. Not only do we have to try and finish this application, but I understand the item 16 on the agenda does need to be resolved before the end of this month. So I'll ask for at least 2 minutes to 15 minutes.
So I have a proposal for 2 15-minute extensions that will take us to 10:30. Councillor, seconded by Councillor Oxley. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Members, is there one before we go to vote? Is there anyone who should have spoken who haven't spoken? Right, thank you very much. In that case, the decision, sorry, yes, I know I'm coming on to that. So therefore, the proposal that we have before you is very clearly written, so therefore I'm looking for a proposer, which is Councillor Mathias. I'm looking for a seconder, Councillor Clifton. Is this a point of order?
I was going to ask if there are sufficient members here that would support me in a recorded vote.
Yes, I can actually take that as well, so that you are making a proposal for a recorded vote. We need 4 other members to support you. So I'm going to ask officers, we have Councillor Oxley, yes, all taken, so we will take a recorded vote. Speed things up. Thank you very much, Councillor Hill. So we have a proposal, we have a seconder. The Council approves the planning application 2016-0874 in accordance with the recommendation and conditions set out in the original report to the Development Control and Licensing Committee. May I ask for all those in favour? Sorry, oh yes, of course. Sorry. to report it. So the second was Councillor Clifton, and our Chief Executive will call out the names and you will answer yea or nay.
For or against? Councillor Bates?
Against.
Councillor Beggy?
For.
Councillor Bird?
Against.
Councillor Rule?
For.
Councillor Burkett? Against. Councillor Callaghan?
Against.
Councillor Clifton?
For.
Councillor Conde?
For.
Councillor Cross?
Nay.
Yes.
No.
Nay.
No.
Councillor Dale? Councillor Dale?
Against.
Councillor Foster?
For.
Councillor Gale?
Against.
Councillor Hemsley?
For.
Councillor King? Oh, sorry. Councillor Lammy?
For.
Councillor Macbeth? For. Councillor Mann?
For.
Councillor Mathias?
For.
Councillor Oxley?
Against.
Councillor Stevenson? Against. Councillor Stewart?
For.
Councillor Thomas?
Against.
Councillor Waller? Against. Councillor Walters?
For.
Councillor Wilson?
For.
13-4. 11 against.
So that proposal, that motion is carried. Thank you very much, members. Yes, we now need to just get Councillor King. Members of the public are very welcome to stay to the end, but if you wish to depart, thank you very much for your attention.